You are listening to Beyond the Measure, episode 19. Listen as I, a young composer, and my wife, a young choir director, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Measure, a podcast for music educators where we interview a bunch of people and we hear their advice. Now, I say that, but today's episode, we are actually not interviewing somebody today. This is just a duet episode. I was going to say solo episode, but it's not really solo.
Dual.
A duel. It's a dual episode where we fight each other. We're changing genres, and now we're just going to argue the whole time. This is a political podcast now. Okay. So we are back from we had to take a little hiatus this past month. Man, it just got so busy and so hectic with both of our schedules. I was basically gone the entire month of September traveling for recruitment season, and I was back on the weekends, but man, it felt like I wasn't even back during that amount of time because it was just so little time. So, and then Kara, you've been busy. Tell us, what have you been up to?
I've been preparing my kids for our first fall concert, our first concert of the year, and that's coming up this Thursday.
Yeah, that's right. So it's an exciting time for sure.
Yep.
But hey,
stressful.
It wouldn't be the job if it wasn't.
Yep.
Well, this probably won't be as long of an episode as usual since it is just the two of us. We tend to shorten those a little bit. We won't go the full amount, but yeah, so we're just going to be talking about something that is pretty applicable to anybody in the music education field, no matter what age group you're in, except for maybe college level, because all the students you have in there are probably people that want to be there, that chose to be there. But Kara, tell us what topic we're going over today.
We're going to be talking about motivating / incentivizing your students within the classroom, and honestly, just in the classroom. Yeah.
And before we get into just ideas that we've seen that work well and that we've come up with, Kara, tell us about just in your past couple years, year and a half of teaching, what has that looked like for you? Has that ever been a struggle for you?
Oh yeah, it's been a struggle. It was a struggle last year, and it's a struggle this year, especially at the beginning, and especially with boys choirs. I don't think it's difficult to motivate girl singers for some reason. I don't know. Most of them like to sing and they chose to be in there, but for boys, 6th grade boys classes, they are some of them did not choose to be in choir, but they had to take it, and usually those kids are the ones that you're going to be struggling with behavioral wise all year. Yeah.
I don't know why that's the case. I feel like we've heard that pretty well across the board, and not saying that there aren't issues with girls at any time, but it seems to be much more of a male young boy issue. And I wonder if that's just because of, boys tend to do a lot more sports and that kind of stuff.
And still struggling with the gender norms of boys don't sing, that's stuff for girls or whatever. But
exactly, it's like all emotional and especially young boys, it's like they don't want to a lot of times, but maybe that's a whole nother discussion for another time. But if we ever have some expert on with data and stuff on that, we could talk about it. But we're just going to kind of go through a short little list that we came up with of things that we've seen and that especially Kara has seen that works well, and some things that we both remember from when we were students in high school and middle school. And that was actually something I was going to ask you too. Right now you're just middle school, but last year you did both middle and high school. Did you see any difference as far as between middle school and high school, or was that more of a middle school issue, or did you do it really matter?
More of a middle school issue. Now, I mean, I think most people who continue to do choir in high school actually did choose to be there. So I think you're going to have less of a struggle with motivating those kids. But obviously sometimes you have those few. But yeah, it's definitely more of a, I think, a middle school issue.
Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier as we were thinking of, topics we could go over with this, and we did think about going over recruitment and retention. And we realized that recruitment is one thing, that's getting people interested in, joining your ensemble that maybe have never done it before. But then retention is the people that are already there to keep them there. And honestly, we realize that this topic really plays a big role in the retention side of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes a lot of sense based off of what you said, in that, if you're able to do these things well, especially on the younger level, especially like middle school, junior high, then that makes a big difference once they get into high school, because if they've had those positive experiences in middle school, then they're going to say, oh, okay, yeah, choir or band or orchestra is fun. I want to keep doing that in high school. And so that definitely makes a big difference overall. So keep that in mind, that, this isn't just meant for middle school teachers, but this will probably be a little bit more applicable the younger age group you are. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the list.
Okay, the first thing we have on our list here is competition. I've seen, especially with my own ensembles, and especially my tenor bass choir, that college, they just crave it. They love it, and they work really well whenever it's given to them. I'll be transparent and say that one of my struggle class this year has been my non-varsity tenor bass choir. I only have 14 of them, but they are crazy, absolutely nuts. And I've worked really, really hard the past 6, 7, 8, almost 9 weeks of school to get them in a good place where I can actually control them. And we're getting there. But one of the things that I had to do was a game called Teacher versus Student. So what I've done is that I write I make like a T chart, and on one part I have T, and on the other side I have S. The T standing for teacher and the S standing for student. Every time that they are following expectations or doing something that if they're doing something correct, they will get a point. So I'll put that under the S chart. Now, but if they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, or they're not following expectations, I get a point. And so by the end of the class period, whoever has the most points, so if my kids have more points than me, they will earn a letter. And we're trying to spell out our mascot, and our mascot is a bison. So they have the opportunity in 5 days to earn a reward. So after they spell out bison, they earn whatever reward. And they've decided that every time they spell out bison, they want to go play football. And so I've been doing that for the past, I think, 4 or 5 weeks now, and it's been working really, really well. Because they just love that competition and having something to look towards.
Yeah, if you want to give a young boy something to work for, give him the opportunity to prove that he's better than somebody else.
Yeah,
that's basically it.
And every time that I put a tally under mine, they're like, "Guys, she just gave herself a point," and they try to. They try to keep each other accountable like they would on a football field. Yeah,
for sure. One thing I do think we should mention, I just kind of realized this, as we were talking, it is worth mentioning that choir is the only type of ensemble where you have the possibility, or you deliberately have all boys or all girls in one group. In band and orchestra, it's by section. It doesn't determine, you're not going to be divided up, intentionally by gender, because it's not based upon, your voice. It's just based upon the instrument. Yeah. And so that is kind of an interesting thing that I think about. I wonder, I don't know what you've seen in your own experience, but just as far as the change, is there any change in dynamic when it comes to a mixed group of, guys being in there, with...
Well, I only had 1, 2, 3. Well, I had 3 groups last year that were mixed, and that was the 6th grade my 6th grade class, and then my non-varsity mixed and my varsity mixed. I mean, most of them are not going to want to go out and play football. The guys will, but the girls won't. So you just have to find like ways that they all can agree upon for their reward. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And it another example of that, I mean, I remember when I was in high school, Miss Justice, one of the ways that she rewarded us as a group was if everybody was eligible to go to UIL, and we all went to UIL, then as our reward, she would let us have, during one of our class periods, have a bouncy house in the choir room, because we had a big enough choir room that a bouncy house would fit in there. And so one year all of us were eligible, and so we got to have a bouncy house brought into the choir room, and we bounced around on the bouncy house, and it was awesome. So that's another just good example of, it's just some sort of fun, all-inclusive thing that you can do for your group.
Yeah, and I think one thing that also has been helping me is not something that I'm doing, but like that the football coaches are doing. They sent out an email to all of us teachers like 2 weeks ago saying, hey, we're trying to incentivize our football players to be more behaved in class and be eligible for grades and stuff. So for every good email that you send us about like a student or like a football student, that will go like in the pot of they get to like pie the coaches in the face.
Oh, nice.
But however, like however many bad emails they get, or like not so great emails, that like takes away. I think they're trying to earn really cool. I think they're trying to earn like 10 good emails or whatever.
Yeah.
But that it takes away, and I think that that's been helping too, because last week was like a miracle week for my non-varsity boys. Like, yeah, I had like a couple of. I have one student that I'm trying to like get rid of because he's not being successful in there. But all the others, I can tolerate and get them on task. And they've been the most on task this week that I've seen. And I think it's because of that. So having that like collaboration with other teachers and especially the coaches, like that's important.
Yeah, there's such thing as fun accountability. Attaching something to whether you do good or bad. I mean, that, makes a huge difference. It adds weight to their actions for sure. Okay, very cool. So the example that you kind of gave as far as, you said it was kind of like the students versus you. So that's kind of like a student versus teacher competition. Another way that you can kind of think about it is more of a student versus student aspect. And this is really up to you, and you'll know what's best for the culture of your classroom. So this may be better for one group and maybe not as good for another group. It all just depends. It's your call. But sometimes it's better to have a competition between different groups within the classroom, like maybe between sections or something like that. One kind of cool thing I saw Mrs. Rhodes, Julie Rhodes, one of my former choir directors, do. I think last year, or the past couple years, I went down there and visited, and I got to observe her choir for a couple class periods, and she had divided up her classroom. She had all of her students. She loves Harry Potter, and so she had all of her students take the Harry Potter test to see which house they were a part of in Harry Potter. And so then she wrote all of the people's names down that were in each house. And so then if there was a group or a person that did something really good or that was behaving really well from a certain in class, she would say, hey, so-and-so, what house are you in? And they'd say, oh, I'm in, whatever. And she would be a Hufflepuff. So, okay, great. There's a point for Hufflepuff. And so it was kind of an incentivization of to have all the students behave, because it was kind of a competition against each other. Honestly, I don't know what the reward was at the end. I'll have to ask her sometime. But yeah, so that's just kind of a good example of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be by section. It could be something creative like that. I had the idea one time. I think it'd be funny with like a boys group. I really like the show Attack on Titan, and there's like 3 or 4 different like branches of the military in the show, and a lot of young boys like that show, and so that might be a good way you can divide them up. So you can be creative with it. It could be something you're interested in or something that you think the other students would enjoy as well.
Yeah, just I guess with that, just be careful with like, oh, the sopranos are doing better than the altos.
Yeah.
Or, like sopranos are better.
Yeah.
And you know, you don't want to say stuff like that.
You don't want to cause resentment toward other classmates.
Yeah. But sometimes middle schoolers just think everything is favoritism, even though it's not. But you just got to be a little careful with that.
Yes. And that was like that example with the Harry Potter, that was in a high school setting. So I don't know if that would necessarily work as well in a middle school setting. So that's all up to you.
Yeah.
Let us take a quick break real quick so I can tell you a little bit about this podcast's primary sponsor, which is Christian Fortner Music. That's right, my own music business. This is the primary platform that I use to sell my music, and you can find it at www.christianfortner, that's Fortner, music.com. Now, you may be thinking, oh, I don't know, this guy is a young composer. Does he really know what he's doing? Well, to be honest, none of us composers really know what we're doing, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. But if you want to kind of get an idea of what my music might be like and if it might be a good fit for your ensemble, you can actually get a free copy of music from me. That's right, a free piece of music. This isn't just a study score. This is full score and parts that you can use for your ensemble to perform completely for free. And you can do that by signing up for my mailing list. So if you go to my website, Christian Fortner, that's Fortner, music.com/mailings, you can sign up for my mailing list right there, and you'll get a link in your inbox where you can select a piece of music for either choir, string orchestra, or band. And I should also mention that the choir piece, it can be either an SAB, SA, or TB version. So for any of you out there that are looking for SAB, SA, TB, specific voicings like that, then this might be a good opportunity for you. So yeah, that's about it. Again, if that's something you'd be interested in, just check it out on my website. And now we can get back to the episode.
Okay, next thing on the list is leadership opportunities. Giving students an opportunity to lead in the class and giving them responsibilities, even if it just means I get to help take roll as soon as I walk in. It really helps. I think we talked about this with Reese Kincaid's episode just a little bit, but I want to talk about a little bit more about my advanced girls choir. At the beginning of the year, I felt like just there is like this wall between me and them. And it's because they had such a wonderful teacher last year that they miss her. And middle schoolers in general are just, nobody likes change. And so they were hesitant to give me a chance. And they've slowly, that wall is crumbling down, and it's great. And I have a much better relationship with these girls. But anyways, something that helped with that wall was giving some girls leadership opportunities. So I have a president and a vice president in each class. But with my advanced, I have like treasurer and historian, all those different kind of ones. But everybody has 2 representatives for each class. And I had 2 girls who tied for president. And both of them were so fit for the job. And one of them was already kind of like, I could tell she was on the fence about me. And I decided, well, I know she's a good leader. Let's see, why not have co-presidents? And so both of them, since they tied, they split up the responsibilities for taking roll whenever they come into class. But as soon as I gave them that role, they took ownership. And whenever students are off task, they will say, come on, ladies, let's get to work. And they try and help to keep that culture going and that culture of success in the class, to keep going. And that's really, really helped because I gave them ownership and responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And in going off of that, it's what that is it's motivation, enthusiasm, is defined by purpose.
Yes.
And because you got to have a purpose in order to have something to work towards. And a lot of students, especially younger students in a musical setting, I mean, I wish it wasn't this way, but it's just how it's going to be. Is there may be a lot of students in there where they don't see creating beautiful music as a purpose worthy of their attention and of their drive. It just may not be. But if they have a purpose of being an example to the people around them, or, you know, taking role each day, or helping out the teacher, making their job or their life easier, or something like that, that may be a purpose that they find worthy of their motivation and of their attention. So it's all about finding those places and those kind of students that might really help give them more of that drive and more of that motivation behind it, because they may not come into school every day and think, oh, I can't wait to sing in choir or to play in orchestra, but they might come in and say, oh, I can't wait to help organize the stuff with Mrs. So-and-so, or to help take role for all of my, stand up in front of all my classmates and take role and make sure they're all behaving, you know. So stuff like that can really make a big difference in the long run. Just another kind of version of what that leadership can look like. Maybe you don't have a lot of options for a lot of individual roles. You could also do something as sort of like a council, just a general council for people to be in. This is kind of the route that we took in my high school's choir. We had a choir council, and so we didn't necessarily have like a president or vice president or anything like that, but we did have students that you had to apply and be accepted into the choir council, and we would meet after school for like maybe 30 minutes, you know, once a month or every couple months, and just kind of talk about, you know, Miss Justice would tell us about what she was planning on doing going forward and wanted our input on, you know, what are some ideas that we could do for this, whether it was what should the theme for our homecoming float be, or what should we all dress up for, like for Halloween, the Halloween, you know, trunk or treat thing we're doing, or what should our trunk theme be? And actually for our spring sing, she would say, you know, what should the graduation song be for, for the seniors and that kind of thing. I think the juniors in choir council got to decide what the design of the t-shirt would be the next year when they were seniors. So just stuff like that. So if you can't necessarily do a hierarchy, you know, president, vice president, that's another option you have available to you as well.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else has been struggling with this, but for some reason, kids just don't want to come to school. Or they don't want to come to class.
Which brings us to our next point.
Yeah. Segueing into absences and tardies. This is like a lot of this stuff is out of your control. You can try and motivate your kids and tell your kids to get to class on time or come to school so you can get good grades, but good grades sometimes, I mean, I've noticed more and more that students don't really care about their grades, which is really sad. But I have chronic tardies in my non-varsity girls class. It is chronic. It's awful. And they're not like just 1 minute late. I have girls coming in 5 minutes late, 15 minutes late. So now I have to count them truant, like skipping class. And I'm like, where have you been? Oh, I was in the bathroom. Well, they know that they're not supposed to go to the bathroom for the first and last 10 minutes of class. Yeah. Like we have that. It's a rule. But whatever. So I'm trying to incentivize them to get to class on time by having a Halloween party, free Halloween party for everybody who has 0 tardies for the month of October. I might be a little bit more lenient, maybe if they have 1 to 2 tardies in there, but
sure.
We'll see how that goes. But right now, I think I've noticed more girls coming to class on time, or more on time than usual. But my party is scheduled for the 21st of October, so
yeah,
I'll keep you updated. But having, I guess, incentivizing them that way as well might help. But again, a lot of that is out of your control. And maybe you have like an absence and tardies committee on your campus. Like we just started one, so we have some people who are coming up with ideas for students to come to class on time and just come to school, period. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good example of, maybe I think we've mentioned the 80-20 principle on this show in the past. Maybe overall your class is pretty well behaved, but maybe there's just one thing that they don't do well on. And maybe just as an example, tardies is that one thing, or maybe that's, having a pencil for choir, whatever it is. Maybe there's just one thing that they're struggling with. And so maybe it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going wrong, but maybe that's the 20% that's causing 80% of the issues and the biggest impact. And so maybe that means creating some sort of specific incentive just based around that one thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be overall behavior. You can narrow down your focus to just tardies or just talking in your section or something like that, whatever that may be. So lots of flexibility there. You always want to focus, what's the one thing that's going to make the biggest difference, and sometimes is the best route to take. And then one final thing we have on this list, these are just kind of the overall broad points we wanted to make. The other last thing was, again, we kind of mentioned this, Reese brought this up on this last episode we did with him. And it is, it's not necessarily, it doesn't sound super fun and how whenever you say it, but it's making not rehearsing or not being in class way less fun than rehearsing. And I think he gave the example of, all right, well, if you don't want to rehearse, then write this really long paper about a composer or whatever, and usually that that makes them want to come back to class.
This kind of is on the same lines, but if you don't start class immediately when that bell rings, that's probably where a lot of your troubles are coming from. I realized within the first 2 weeks, you kind of have to take roll. Like, you have to, in order to get to know these students' names, you have to take the time, the first 2 to 5 minutes of class, to call each name, and then you have to start rehearsal. But once you have those names down, I noticed that kids didn't want to come to class because they knew, oh, well, she hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
And so once I had everybody's names down and I took that responsibility of taking roll to somebody else in my class, once that bell rings, I play the first chord on the piano, tell them to stand, and we're warming up. I do that with every single choir, but especially I make it a point for the ones who are more tardy than the others. And I've noticed they're kind of rushing to their spot now. Yeah. Because they're like, oh, well, I can't, we're warming up. She starts class right when the bell rings. Yeah, and you're also, and I also think about what Wendy Week said in her episode, is that having that sort of routine and you're respecting the people that did show up on time, you're communicating that care and respect towards them. And that makes those other students that aren't as enthusiastic to come on in to be a little more open to that as well. So yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty much all we have for this episode. Now, that's not to say these are the only things available to you as tools. So with that being said, if there are any things that we didn't mention on here that don't really fall into one of these categories we already went over, go ahead and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. My email is christian@christianfortnermusic.com, and just say, hey, I was listening to the episode, and here's something that I like to do, and we'd love to hear what you have available, and we'd like to share that again in the future. Yeah. And also, before I forget, if you haven't been able to, go ahead and leave us a rating on whichever platform you use. And if you even want to leave us a review, that'd be great. That would really help the show. And you can also follow us on social media. We do have an Instagram for the podcast. It's beyond.the.measure. That's it. So you kind of got the cool aesthetic username. All right. Well, that's it for today. We will see y'all for next week's episode. I say week, it's technically 2 weeks, but we are excited going forward. We're finally kind of finalizing our process for doing online interviews. So we're about to start branching out to other people that aren't just in the Abilene area. We're hoping to get a wider variety of thoughts and experiences from lots of people. So really excited about that. So stay tuned. It's going to be really fun going forward. See ya.
Bye.